This podcast is sponsored by Dust Element. Frustrated with your asset library? Is it slow, unorganized, and outdated? The VFX asset library software Dust Element is just what you need. Built with high industry standards, Dust Element is the smart solution to organize your VFX elements. The tool is fully customizable and adapts existing workflows as well as naming conventions. Check out www.dust-element.com for more info or a personal live demo. Hi everyone, welcome to the Befores and Afters podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters. Today we're talking The Voice in the Hollow, a new short film from Miguel Ortega and Tran Ma. You might know them as the duo also behind The Niño, an amazing project from a couple of years ago. This time they've gone and made an animated short about an African fable. And it has such a distinctive look and feel, so what I would highly recommend is checking out the posting first at Befores and Afters to watch it, and even some of the behind the scenes. The Voice in the Hollow was rendered in Unreal Engine 5, and here I talked to Miguel about how the game engine was used on the project. Amazingly, Miguel and Tran had hardly any experience with Unreal, but they really jumped right in, as you'll hear. There's some really cool advice here, I think, for new filmmakers using real-time, but also how to just get your next project made. Let's go straight to the chat now. How did the idea come to you guys in the first place?
So we were filming the Niño. There's a few scenes that we shot in an actual cave in North California at a place called the Moaning Cave Cavern. And when we were down at the bottom, they told us, hey, don't go over to that section over there because that's where the skeletons are. And I'm already like a total, I'm super paranoid being in tight space. I'm claustrophobic. Like I hate it, right? Those are my nightmares, or claustrophobia. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're down here with a bunch of skeletons. So I freaked out. I'm like, what do you mean skeletons? And they're like, yeah, that's why it's called the Moaning Cave Cavern. Everyone, according to legend, people would say that they could hear the moans of a little girl coming out of a little hole, which was the entrance of the cavern. And people would approach this hole to try to help this little girl. And what they didn't know is there was a 250-foot drop to the bottom. So they thought the little girl fell 8 feet or whatever, and she was trapped at the bottom of this little hill. But it was a 250-foot drop. And there was dozens of bodies, one on top of another, by the time it was excavated in the turn of the century. Ironically enough, around the same time as when the Niño would have taken place, when he does go down the cave. What I thought was amazing, though, is at the bottom of the pile. Well, first of all, it's everyone assumes that everyone that fell trying to help the moaning girl, right? Hence the Moaning Cave Cavern. And at the bottom of the pile, what do you think was at the bottom of the pile of skeletons? The skeleton of a little girl, right? And I just thought, oh my God, like I'm definitely not a superstitious person, but I always want to have that superstition part of the brain turned on for inspiration. And I was like, that's pretty freaking awesome. Like, what are the chances that the bottom skeleton is a little girl? So immediately that just stuck with me, and I kept trying to come up with ideas around it. And then one day I was like, let's just come up with how that first girl ended up in the hole, right? Which, by the way, this skeleton at the bottom is a 10,000-year-old Paleo Indian girl that was somehow in California, right? She was actually from like Chinese descent. So that in itself is really kick-ass, right? Because she crossed through they assume she crossed through the Bering Strait, came down California, and that's where that happened. But so I was like, let's just tell the story of when this first happened, but I didn't care to make it about the Moaning Cave Cavern in particular. It was more about, that was just the seed of the inspiration. So I thought, let's just make it take place in a fictitious Africa, and let's make it a Cain and Abel story. Let's go back to the second oldest story. And let's make it about two sisters, and one of them dropping the other one in there.
It's such a powerful story, and I love that origin of it, which has a lot of meaning and must have been fermenting in your mind. But you're also a visual effects artist and a hands-on kind of artist, and you're both like that, you and Tran. You must have also been thinking at the same time, how could you make this? And ultimately, of course, you made it in Unreal Engine. I'm kind of wondering how quickly you gravitated towards real time for this, or whether you thought you might just do this some other way originally and then UE came along.
Well, everything we've done, you've seen like the Nino is live action. So
Mm,
that was our first idea. And this was actually a small part of a very big script that had nothing to do with this mini story. It was actually supposed to be a story within a larger feature script about a comic book artist, and the voice in the hollow is the story that she writes, right?
right.
And we're still trying to do that project, and that's a whole other thing. But um, so originally it was let's do this thing live action, and we really quickly realized we don't have the money to do this, right? Because authenticity on this and on the Nino is important to me. Like it has to be spoken. We're telling a Japanese tale like the Nino, they have to speak Japanese. If this is in Africa, they need to speak an African tongue. So my first thought was, okay, let's shoot this in California. It's fantasy anyway. We'll make it look like parts of Africa. It's not like our film necessarily looks like Africa either. It's pretty fantastical looking. And we really quickly hit like a roadblock where no one that at least auditioned for us or applied for the role spoke Swahili in California, and we auditioned almost 500 people.
Right.
Or some would say they did, but it was clear that they didn't speak it that well. And it just started getting really out of control. So we had just finished doing the Unreal Fellowship, which was a 4 week course. And that's how much experience we had in Unreal. We had 4 weeks of experience basically.
Mm,
And we're like, let's just kind of do it. And Alex Alvarez from Noman was he wanted to do it in Unreal. Obviously, Unreal is the flavor of the week, right? So everyone was interested in it, and so were we. So we're like, let's give it a shot and let's just do it in Unreal. And we really didn't know what the hell we were doing because we had 4 weeks of experience. So yeah.
that's amazing, and actually does sum up the sort of vibe and wow factor of Unreal at the moment. I guess in some ways, Unreal is a way to help make a film, but there's still very much a traditional process in terms of scripting, coming up with concept art, and even building assets still happens in a more traditional way, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What I like about Unreal more than anything is it almost feels more like live action than traditional VFX. And I mean that in the sense that sometimes we would open up our file and the camera was in like a random position,
Mm,
and we're like, "Oh damn, that's a pretty nice shot." Like that you don't that doesn't happen in traditional VFX. You don't stumble onto a good shot with nice lighting. That's something that you get with live action, right? Where you're like, oh damn, I never even thought about that. On the Nino, there was a moment where I walked into one of the rooms and Tamlin Tamita was on the floor reading the script, trying to memorize, and I was like, wow, that looks so freaking beautiful. Let's do it on the floor. Let's have her be on the floor, right? And that works so
mm,
much better. Those kind of happy accidents, you don't get that in CG. And that's what we really loved from it. Yeah.
mm. I'll come back to some of the cinematography and lighting that you were likely to achieve in Unreal later. But firstly, just the look language of this film. It has a distinctive look. How did you settle on that? How did you come up with that in terms of the very graphic, almost stylized nature of the characters and the world?
Uh, well, that a lot of that had to do with not fighting our own limitations in Unreal and fighting the technology's limitations in Unreal.
Hmm.
Uh, Tran and I have done photoreal characters for 15 years, so we can make a character look real. We've worked at Tippett, at Digital Domain, at Lightstorm. We've done our share of photoreal characters, but we knew that we didn't want to be caught up trying to figure out how to fake refraction on an eye, right? How are we going to get that refraction to look perfect? How are we going to get the faces to look photoreal? So immediately we're like, let's do the opposite. Instead of trying to make this look better than everyone else and trying to make a who can make Unreal look the most photoreal, let's go the complete opposite direction. Let's make them look like they're all made out of carved wood. Let's make the eyes just a sphere with a painted texture and cracks on the eyes. There's no refraction. Um, and we actually considered for a while not putting even motion blur and rendering it on twos to kind of really go for a more stop motion-y feel. So it was just going the opposite. Don't try to flex the tech muscle, but just flex the style muscle. And that was, again, just limitations of our own limitations and the technology's limitations uh, based on where we're at. Yeah.
And in terms of the tools that you used, including Unreal, what was it? Some of the traditional DCCs like Maya and Houdini. What else did you use in terms of texturing? And there's some really nice, I thought, cloth simulation that again fits in with that more stylized look as well. But tell me a bit about the other tools that you used.
Totally. Maya is our mothership, so everything goes through Maya. We were doing all the animation through, I don't know if you want to get into the mocap stuff at the moment, but we were running all the mocap from Xsense into Maya. We were doing all the cleanup in Maya. Modeling is all in Maya, ZBrush, and Mudbox, which is the staples for the whole industry pretty much. Texturing was all Substance Painter on this one, which was just amazing. That program is just black magic. We used Mixer, which is not used as often, or it's not mentioned enough, but it's by Epic, and I call it like the greatest floor texturing program that ever existed. Like, it's great for planes, but I mean, just fantastic. Like, you're like, okay, I just want to make a piece of ground and put little puddles and little pieces of grass and whatever. It's just phenomenal at it, and it connects automatically to what mega scans, and it just pulls all the stuff directly from online, throws them into your directory. You could just start layering it, but it's all in 3D. You're seeing the shaders, and the tiling is all happening in real time. So that was huge for any close-up shots. Marvelous designer, you mentioned the clothing. Everything was simulated in Marvelous, and then exported out as Alembic sequences. And what else did we use? Houdini was done for all the blood shots. So anything that had blood or anything that had like grains moving in the ground, or when the anteater gets killed and he's like kicking around and moving on the dirt is actually interacting with the anteater, and that was all in Houdini. Yeah, so I think that's most of it.
And you mentioned the
Yeah, I think
motion.
that's it.
Yeah, you mentioned the motion capture work there. What kind of shoot did you undertake with XN's tools?
So we bought the Awinda and the Xsense gloves, and we had less than days of experience with mocap. Like, we just had no idea. It was just how we roll. We just like jump in the fire. We're like, we'll figure this thing out somehow. It can't be that hard. So we had no experience, and luckily Xsense, it's pretty awesome. So the level of cleanup wasn't like, I was afraid that it was going to be the equivalent of like a 3D model that is scanned, and a lot of people think in their head like, oh, you just scanned it and it's done, and then you quickly realize like, no, you have to do so much. But it was the Xsense stuff actually was pretty nice. The only thing you would have issues with is with an Xsense suit, you could do a backflip and land like Iron Man, and it'll look amazing. But if you want your two index fingers to touch each other, it's impossible. The space position is not accurate. So movements, big movements are great, but like world position is impossible. You want to touch the top of your head, it's going to go right through your skull. Your hand will go right through your skull. So that's the only cleanup, but that's the best kind of cleanup, right? You're just like, oh, grab the hand, move it a little bit up. That's it, right? The hand is cutting through the hips, move it a little bit to the side. So that was that. The hands required probably the most cleanup, but that was once we just had a library of poses, it became very easy. Um, yeah, and that was it. It was pretty good on the body, and then the face we ended up using this program called Mocap X. They gave it to us for free, which was awesome of them to use on this project, and it's basically using the Apple Face AR kit. So it's using the 52 blend shapes, and then it's being triggered uh, by your iPhone.
Hmm.
So we put it on. We bought a mocap helmet, put the iPhone on, and then it was capturing all the motion, and then we would bring that back into Maya. It would give you a particular file format that was their proprietary file format, and you would just apply it onto your model in inside of Maya. So that was pretty easy. That did require the most amount of cleanup, though. Um, that required the most amount of cleanup because of eye lines. Um, or some. Well, the tough thing was that this entire movie is also in Swahili. Our
Hmm.
cast is entirely in Africa, so all the recordings were done via Skype, and we obviously couldn't bring them into the United States because of finance reasons to do the actual facial motion capture. And part of the reason why we cast everyone in Africa, remember, is because we couldn't find anyone that spoke Swahili in LA that applied for this role. So I had to memorize everything in Swahili and I had to do all the motion capture myself. So that required the
Oh,
most amount of hand cleanup because I don't know Swahili at all, right? So I had to get the timing exactly right to match what they were saying, plus get the expressions down and the eye lines and everything. So that was very difficult.
that's amazing. I suppose, that throws up the challenges of being in different continents and the pandemic kind of still being around and all that sort of thing. You would have had a different approach, I suppose, if you were all in the same place.
Oh, it would have been amazing because we could have just gotten it all done with one go. But
Mm.
here the body had to be done. I initially thought like, oh, if I could do the face, I could do the body as well. And I started recording myself playing, these 13-year-old girls. And really quickly I realized that unless I want them to all walk like Frankenstein, that it's probably not a good idea because I do not move like, and I actually did a few versions where Tran would be like, no, you have to move your hips more. And I would move my hips and it looks so ridiculous. And I was like, okay, we need to cast a young girl to play these roles. And then the faces, I did them. That was fine. And then they did the voices in Tanzania and Kenya.
Amazing. But before I ask you a bit more about the Unreal side of things again, there's also some really neat, I guess it's 2D animation in the film. And,
Yeah.
that's a really nice surprise and fits really well with the aesthetic as well. But how did you handle that work?
So that was a late addition, and it was something that I've wanted to do even in the Ningyo. The Ningyo originally was supposed to have a 2D sequence. So originally, and apparently I've heard that there's a whole community of this called the CalArts Rejects, and I'm one of the CalArt Rejects that wanted to be a 2D animator.
Right.
Patrick Osborne is the one who told me this, and he's won an Academy Award and an Emmy. He was rejected from CalArts. So there's a whole group of
Mm.
people that have been rejected from CalArts, and I've always wanted to do 2D animation in any way possible. Even the Green Ruby Pumpkin has it, which we now use as our little logo, which is a little pilgrim with the kids burning at the stake. That's our company logo now. And so we've always wanted to use it. Last minute, we're like, can we do it? Can we do it? Can we afford it? And we ended up just doing it. And it was all done by a tiny crew of Iranian friends of ours. And they just like knocked it out. They crushed it with just a few weeks. So yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, that's really cool.
Uh,
So, so coming to Unreal, and you mentioned you don't have a lot of experience in it. What were you finding? And you kind of mentioned this already in terms of it making it feel like you could work in live action, but you were in a CG environment. What were the other big benefits of doing this, with real time tools?
the biggest advantage that I really loved about this project is the night before the premiere at Noman, I had the idea that we need to have the vines wrap around her neck right before the end scene. And it was so easy to do. It was like,
Mm.
all right, let's just animate the vine, put it in there, boom, it's done. There wasn't like, can we get it rendered in time? How is it gonna look? We were constantly be able to change creative decisions uh, really quickly, and I just completely love that. Of course, you could do that with VFX too, but not VFX on an indie budget, which is what we're in, right? If you have a render farm, then sure, you could do that as well. But we don't have that. So that was awesome. The little paper mask that the girl is wearing, that was added way later. We had already done the motion capture. She wasn't supposed to be wearing that paper mask or the little fabric mask.
Mm.
And I thought she should totally be wearing this little fabric mask. We were able to just add it in, boom, done. We're rendered in 10 minutes. We have all our stuff. So I just love that the ability to be able to constantly have ideas and it not be this burden on the rendering well on the rendering. That's really the killer.
Mm. And the thing
Um,
that go ahead, sorry, Miguel.
no. Go for it.
The one other thing that I've also reacted to when I watched the film was, although I totally agree you didn't go for, real world photorealism in terms of photoreal characters, there's something that seems to, at Unreal, seems to give you, which makes it feel rich and real and, photoreal in the sense that it's just so vibrant. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure you can achieve that in other renderers, but there is something about this film which just buzzes and bounces off the screen.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think that was our goal was to really write it and shoot it like a live action film, not
Mm,
to shoot it like an animated film. And I think maybe that's what you're feeling.
mm,
The camera could never move in a way that it couldn't move in the real world. It had to always be constrained to real world limitations. And if there was a moment of chaos in the movie, then you could go handheld. If not, it was always on tracks. There was a couple of like crane shots, but not really. Always trying to keep it grounded because the characters look like little dolls. I was able to push the depth of field or the shallow depth of field a little bit more than probably would be quote unquote physically accurate, but it was okay because they're little stylized dolls. And I know that one of the real strengths of Unreal is their shallow depth of field looks fantastic. So I just was like, let's totally push that. And the other thing that also I think makes it feel more organic is the fact that we grabbed a bunch of 4K scans of 16 millimeter film and then just overlaid it on top of everything, degrading the quality of the image. Unreal is so good that I almost don't like it being that good. I always want things to look.
mm.
I'm not a film snob by any sense. Like I'm not the type that's like, oh, I would only shoot on film. I would never go back to shooting on film, but I love the look of film. I'm not unrealistic about you can match the look of film on digital. I know that. I think anyone that says otherwise is being a little bit ridiculous. But I still want to match that look. I love grain. I love soft images. So that was it. Just trying to get that organic feel.
I was going to ask you about that film look that clearly is added to the film. So was that a compositing side, or was it something direct in the renderer in terms of adding that
No, it
16 mil
was
thing?
uh it's a tiny little bit of both. So we did add a tiny bit of chromatic aberration inside of Unreal, which worked good. And we did preview it originally with grain because you can put grain in Unreal.
Hmm.
But we ended up kind of stripping the grain, not kind of, we stripped it out entirely at the end. And then we just bought these 4K scans and just threw it in Premiere. We didn't even run. I'm a huge nuke guy. That's my main tool. And I think Two Shots had nuke. Everything else was just done right out of the renderer and then overlaid the effects in Premiere. So pretty low tech.
It's very effective, and I think again adds to the time vibe and the location vibe, and um, it's a really fun part of the film. I was going to ask you uh, what the plan is with this film in terms of release and any short film festivals and things like that.
We kind of didn't have much of a plan with this. Our plan on this project, we like I mentioned earlier, we had just finished this development hell on the Nino. It broke our hearts. We were just
Mm.
devastated by the way everything played out, and there's still life that could come out of it, but we kind of wanted to do something where there was no plan. Because if there was any commercial goals with this, we wouldn't have done it with nudity in Swahili, uh,
Mm.
as violent as it is. You know what I mean? You go through the list of things that this has that an animated feature should not have, and this has all of them. This is just everything you should not do in an animated film. So yeah, we'll see. We submitted it to film festivals, but one of the problems is a lot of film festivals are very much gatekeepers. They don't want the movie if it's premiered in online. They don't want the movie if it's premiered in another festival. They don't,
Mm.
and I just don't have after the 4 years or whatever 3 years of development. I just don't want anyone to. You know what I mean? It just kind of felt like I'm back to that, and I'm just like, let's just put the movie out. People like it. Hopefully, it'll spread by itself. We'll submit it to the film festivals that are open-minded about that kind of stuff, but that's it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I should
Yeah.
share, I should tell listeners that one of the amazing things about this film is that you generously documented the process for Noman's YouTube channel. And obviously, you're part of Noman. But that is an amazing resource for people wanting to sort of learn more about things. Did you think you would basically record about 90 hours of stuff? That's amazing.
I think it is without a doubt the most in-depth making of ever because we actually started getting insecure. We're like, who the hell's gonna watch 90 hours of it? And there's a few people that have actually written to us and been like, we watched them all. And
Oh my gosh.
that was very difficult for us to get used to because we are like most CG guys and girls. We don't we never wanted to do a YouTube channel and be like public figures. And we want to be our nerds and be in our house and buy Star Wars toys and then make stuff, right? And
Mm.
so that was very tough. And the toughest thing is not even so much that I'm shy to talk around people. It's more that I don't want to show stuff until it's ready. And that was really difficult because if you go back and you watch episode 1, 2, 3, 4, some of the stuff looked really freaking rough. I mean, again, 4 weeks of Unreal. So some of
Mm.
our stuff was really nasty. And we were like, oh my God, we're going to fail publicly in the most humiliating way because we're like, it's almost like like showing yourself getting dressed. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to show that part of it. So, but you know what? Now the truth is, I didn't promote it a lot while we were working on it because we were terrified that it was going to we could fail. And now that it's done, we're like, okay, now let's promote it. And we've been promoting it all over the place and I mean promoting the 90 hours.
Mm.
Um, because now we're like, okay, now it's actually cool because you could actually see how the creative process is not a linear process. It's like one step forward, 5 steps back, 2 nights of thinking you're terrible, and then 4 steps forward. That's. I think it's cool that it's like that.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there just isn't that kind of resource out there either. So I'm so glad that you did that, and I'm so glad that you're very honest about how it feels to be an artist working on something like this. But thank God you persevered and made such an amazing short. I just wanted to congratulate you and Tran and everyone who worked on it. And thank you for just sharing your knowledge. It's really, really cool, Miguel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. Really appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or whatever, just write to us on our YouTube channel. We reply to everybody, and we appreciate any shares and follows that we get. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much.